You got to call a meeting.
Was the meeting posted? Was the meeting posted, Ryan?
Yes, so the commission now convenes the meeting. It's been posted with the city clerk's office on July 23rd.
Okay.
Commission accept the meeting minutes for July the 11th, 2019.
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Proceeding with number 1 on our agenda, we have applications for special one-day license to sell dispense malt beverages and wines only, or either one. Ashley Roper, catering manager for the Aramark, for the following events: the Lilla Laurie Retirement Celebration, which is Wednesday, August 7th, 2019, 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. at the University Crossing at 220 Pawtucket Street. There is also an application for the ROTC reception to be held Monday, August 19th, 2 p.m. to 7 p.m. at the Allen House at 2 Solomon Way. And her third application is for an event at the Ames Hall. It is the Ames Hall Time Capsule Unveiling to be held Saturday, October 19th, 2019, from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. at the Alumni Hall Lounge at 84 University Ave.
Name and address, please.
King Junior Way.
Thank you. So this looks all pretty straightforward. Must be quite a party there, 1 to 6.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Any questions?
No question.
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, unanimously
Good luck.
approved.
Okay, thank you.
Commission now proceed with application for special events permit for the amplification of sound, starting with Alan F. Kaplan of the Middle Street Village, Inc., doing business as the Village Smokehouse, 9298 Middle Street, for sound system for the Lowell Folk Festival, Friday, July 25th, that should be Friday, July 26th, Saturday, July 27th, Sunday, July 28th, for an enclosed outdoor area in front of 9298 Middle Street. Also, we have Joseph Carrero of Mariachi Foods, Inc., doing business as El Potro Mexican Grill at 124 Merrimack Street, a sound system for the Lowell Folk Festival for Saturday, July 27th, 2019, enclosed outdoor area in front of 124 Merrimack Street. We have Christopher Glenn Hayes of the Lowell Waterways Vitality Initiative for the Canal Side Arts Series, spoken word, cultural pop music, 2-speaker amp PA for the following venues, starting with the Lucy Larkin Park on Friday, August 2nd, 2019, from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Then there is the Ecumenical Plaza on Friday, August 16th, 2019, from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. And the third venue would be the Kerouac Park on Friday, September 20th, 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. And we also have Nick Petrakis of the Blue Shamrock for a sound system for live music, DJ, and radio during the months of July, August, September, October 2019 for the sidewalk seating area of Market Street and Palmer Street.
Are any of these people present?
Gentlemen?
Yeah, I knew Chris was here. Everyone step up, give me your name and your address, please.
Joseph Carrero, 124 Merrimack Street.
Thank you.
Nick Petrakis, 105 Market Street.
Thank you.
Chris Hayes, 100 Mass Mills, number 304.
Thank you.
Alan Kaplan, 98 Middle Street.
Thank you. Sound. Do you all understand that we don't want to hear it up in the Highlands or up in Belvedere, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do we have any complaints from last year? No
Not that I'm aware
complaints.
of. Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Any questions? Go ahead.
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. You're all approved. Thank you very much. Have fun.
Thank you.
Commission will now proceed with applications for sidewalk stand. There's Elena and Doug Brackett of the Purple Carrot Bread Company at 107 Merrimack Street for Lowell Folk Festival, July 26th, 27th, and 28th, 2019. And on behalf of the U.S. Army Recruiting Center, we have Staff Sergeant John Goldwaith, U.S. Army, for 107 Merrimack Street for the Lowell Folk Festival, July 26th, 27th, and 28th.
Step forward, please. Name and address.
Elena Brackett, 107 Merrimack Street.
Thank you.
Staff Sergeant John Goldthright, 107 Merrimack Street.
Thank you. So you both understand you need to not totally block the road?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Pretty wide sidewalk, we should be okay.
Oh, yeah.
Any questions?
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Thank you both very much, and good luck on your recruiting goal.
Thank you, sir.
Good luck.
We'll do our best, always.
Is Renee Walterding here? Renee Walterding?
Let's move on and take a look at that later.
Proceeding with number 5 on our meeting agenda, Commission will now review the status of the license holder named MBOA Alliance LLC. Stanley Tabby is the manager of record, LLC manager, and Peter Tamajong, LLC manager. This is a license for all alcoholic beverages restaurant at 135 Central Street. Premises is under construction. The certificate of inspection is impending, and the 2019 license has not been issued. This will be the third date in which Mr. Peter Tamajong will address the commission regarding the status of the ongoing construction.
Name and address, please.
My name is Peter Tamajong, 135 Central Street, the business.
Thank you. And what is your status now?
We made very good progress. We finally got the rough inspection for the plumbing and electrical, sprinkler. So we're giving the green light to close the walls and get the work finished. So I think we pretty much on the last line of the construction work. So we expect that Mike will finish up all the building, and we're closing the toilets. The equipment's been installed. The whole day they did all the installation. So we should be good to call the city to come and do the inspection. But we still have to wait for the sprinkler to come and remove 2 heads, and that will happen next week. After next week, then we're gonna call the framing general inspector to come and see if we're good to close up all the equipment. Then we can call for the city for the hygiene and everything to come. So 2 weeks ago, that's a date where we got the final approval to move on. We brought the city inspector and the people in the city to come and look at it and give us the final green light to close up. So we're very busy currently to get stuff finished.
Okay, anybody have any questions?
So when do you think you might be opening?
If we finish all the work, we're hoping that in September we'll get opened.
September?
September, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Got anything else for us, or we're just looking forward to seeing you in September?
We pray every day, so we stop paying rents without having to open. So we're thinking that in September we should be in good shape, except the city, the inspector say something else. But I think we're in good shape. They said everything's fine, lined up for September.
Thank you very much for coming in and updating us.
Thank you.
Good
so
luck.
much. Thank you.
Set a date, or-
No, not yet.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next.
Commission now proceed with the number 6 on our meeting agenda. Proceeding with the hearing on the allegations of misconduct as charged by Raymond Kelly Richardson, Superintendent of Police, against the licensee LD Holdings LLC, doing business as Bar 74 Lounge and Grill, Abigail Murphy, manager, the all-alcoholic beverage restaurant at 7678 Merrimack Street. Allegations of misconduct occurred on the licensed premises June 30th, 2019, at approximately 2:07 a.m., as noted in the superintendent's communication dated July 9th, 2019.
Good evening, gentlemen. Attorney Travis Jacobs for the licensee LD Holdings.
Welcome back.
Thank you, sir.
Abigail Murphy, 74 Merrimack Street.
Okey-doke. So this is a hearing, and would you like the allegations read into the record?
I don't think that's necessary.
Okay. So, we apparently, when I was looking, changed our procedures a little bit, and we'll hear from the police about what they think went on.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. We just want to give just a little basis for what we're going to have a couple officers testify to. We have two officers here who were there that night and are going to testify into what their observations were. Just a little background, just in case nobody knows. On the June 30th at approximately 2:07, Lowell police officers assigned to downtown patrol observed two females enter the establishment known as Bar 74. Upon arriving at the door of the establishment, the officers could see approximately a dozen people inside. The doorman was identified as Scotty Foreman. The manager of record was present, identified as Abigail Murphy. Ms. Murphy claimed the patrons were with the promoter and DJ. She was unable to provide any paperwork related to the promoter license being issued by the License Commission. It's explained to Ms. Murphy patrons cannot be inside an establishment after 2 a.m., and the report would be forwarded to the License Commission. Officers confirmed 11 individuals inside Bar 24 after 2 a.m. Those are essentially the facts. If you like, we could have Officer Perrin come in to talk to about his observations of that night.
Sure. Please identify yourself and give us an address, and then tell us your story.
Danny Perrin Jr., 50 Arcane Drive. So that night I was working the downtown patrol with Officer Kadari and Captain Hodgson. We were on Merrimack Street in front of Bar 74. We observed two females exit a car. They walked inside of the bar. We walked over, we could see about a dozen other people inside there. We spoke with the doorman who went and got Miss Murphy. We explained the situation to her that they could not be in there. And then 11 people were then asked to leave the bar.
They did leave the bar?
Yes, right away.
Okey-doke.
Do you remember what time that was?
It was 2:07 a.m.
Okay, and what time did the bars close?
I believe everybody has to be out by 1:45.
Okay, and did you have a conversation with Ms. Murphy at that time?
We did.
And what did she tell you in regards to why the individuals were there?
They were all with the DJ. They were all personnel of his.
Okay, and did you go inside the bar itself?
We did not.
Okay. Could you see what the people were doing from the window inside the bar?
Mostly they were just sitting at the tables.
All right. And did you actually see anybody helping the DJ at the end of the night?
Not the people that left.
Okay. And have you done this detail before?
Yes, many times.
And you said that most of the time that everybody's out by 1:45 in all of the bars.
Everybody, yes.
So do you do a check of all of the bars at the end of the night?
We do.
Okay. And was this the only bar you found that was in violation of the
Yes.
time frame? Okay. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
I'd also like to call Captain Hodgson.
Okay. Name and address, please.
James Hodgson, 50 Arcane Drive, Lowell, Mass.
Can you tell me, on the night of June 29th into June 30th, were you working that night?
Yes, I was. I was the supervisor of the downtown patrol. We were in full police uniform on foot patrol in the downtown area, checking liquor establishments while they were operating, and also after 2 a.m.
What were your hours that night?
We worked from 11 PM to 3 AM.
And who were you working with?
I was working with Officer Osama Kadari and Officer Danny Perrin Jr.
Okay, and can you describe what your routine is when you do that detail?
Yes, when we come on at 11 o'clock, we commence a foot patrol at the downtown liquor establishments. We walk by them, we check liquor establishments for overcrowdedness, any disorderly behavior. And then at about 1:15 AM, we have a fixed post that we take, which was at Middle and Palmer that evening, and the patrol officers working the late night shift took other posts throughout the downtown area, and they're strategically placed at closing time, so there's no disorder. Everybody moves along in an orderly fashion.
Okay, and so shortly after 2 AM, did you happen to observe anything at Bot 74?
Yes, after 2 AM, what we do between 2 and 3 is we check liquor establishments, make sure there's no patrons inside after hours. So we were on Merrimack Street, standing across the street from Bar 74 on the sidewalk, when we observed 2 females enter the establishment, sat down on the left side by the front window, by the sidewalk. At that time, we walked over to inquire what was taking place. At that time, we observed what appeared to be approximately a dozen more patrons inside the establishment at about 2:07 AM.
Did you speak to anybody at the establishment?
Yes, I spoke to a male who identified himself as a doorman. The door was locked. He came to the door, spoke to him about the patrons, and I asked to speak to who the manager was on duty.
And did you speak to the manager?
Yes, a female, Ms. Murphy.
Okay, and what was that conversation?
The conversation was about our observations of the patrons inside. Stated that they were with the DJ, or first she stated a promoter, then when I asked her about the promoter, any licensing approval from the commission regarding the promoter, she said then they were with the DJ. We told them that they have to immediately vacate the premises, which they did. We remained at the front door, and the reason we remained outside the front door is so we get an accurate head count of how many patrons were in there. We counted 12 exiting, but one was the DJ. So we
Okay.
counted 11 patrons.
So you never actually went inside the bar?
That is correct.
Okay, and they never produced a license that was issued by the License Commission in regards to, related to a promoter?
Right, that was the initial conversation there with the promoter, and then it was a DJ, and there was a DJ present.
Did you get any information on any of the individuals that were there?
No, in my opinion, they didn't commit any crime. We didn't see anybody consuming alcohol. We were investigating potential violations of the rules and regulations set forth by the Lowell License Commission with the license establishment.
Okay, and what is those rules that you're talking about?
There's 2 rules regarding re-entry of a establishment. No patrons are allowed to re-enter after 1:30 AM, and no patrons are to be on the premises after 2 AM. That's the official closing time of liquor establishments in the city of Lowell.
And again, the time that this all occurred was after 2 PM, 2 AM, I should say.
Yes, we walked over, when we saw the females enter the establishment, it was 2:07 AM.
Okay, I have no further questions.
Thank you.
I have one for the captain. Captain,
Go ahead.
did you say nobody was drinking?
Right, we didn't observe any alcohol violations. We just observed the violations of the patrons being on the premises.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Attorney Jacobs.
Gentlemen, so it's my understanding now that I'm not allowed to cross-examine anyone?
You can ask me, and I'll ask questions.
Okay, fair enough. No disrespect, I just want to get on the record that I object to the refusal or the inability to cross-examine witnesses at a disciplinary hearing. That being said, I have a handful of very important questions.
Okay, I note your objection, and I'm sure it'll be in the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Go ahead.
It doesn't sound like the officers made any attempt to speak to any of these alleged patrons, even though they had a clear opportunity to enter, clear opportunity and ability to speak to any of the people that they saw sitting inside or outside or re-entering. And I think a good question for them would be, why didn't they do that? The next question would be is, if they didn't do that, how do they know that they weren't employees or members of the staff or with the entertainment or the photographer? The second thing is I would ask, or the third thing I would ask is, what was this supposed promoter promoting? Because it sounds to me from the officer's testimony, quite respectfully, that he is equating the presence of a DJ with a promoter, but that's not accurate. There's not even a violation for not having a promoter license in this particular referral. But a promoter is someone who promotes events at bars. This particular establishment has an entertainment license, so it has every right to have a DJ and the DJ's staff, photographer, equipment movers inside the premises at any time without a promoter's license. So I don't understand this promoter issue.
Mr. Jacobs,
Yes, sir.
as I'm taking notes, the idea that it was a promoter came from Ms. Murphy, did it not?
No, actually it didn't, and we can have Ms. Murphy explain that, I suppose, in a moment. But her report of what was discussed was that there was a DJ inside and the people were with the DJ, the two girls rather, were with the DJ, and other people were security and employees. Now, if you think about this bar, right, if there's only 11 people inside, or they had 11 people leave, how many people do they think are employed at this place? You have 5 or 6 security, you have 3 or 4 bartenders, barbacks, waitresses, then you have the DJ, a photographer, and his staff. I mean, if there's only 11 people inside, none of whom are drinking, that's the officer's testimony, how are these immediately assumed to be patrons? You see, from my perspective, this is going back to problems we had previously, making assumptions and issuing violations that are totally baseless. All they had to do was go in and ask. We don't have any names. We have no names to suggest that these people weren't really employees. So I don't understand why we're here. I would love to ask the manager of records some questions. She's an experienced manager of records. She used to manage, but wasn't the manager of record at Dudley's. She's worked downtown for many years. She's very familiar with the rules and regulations. If you want to ask some of the questions to the officers, I'd be happy to step aside for a moment, and then I can ask Ms. Murphy some questions.
Why don't you press on with Ms. Murphy, and then we'll go to the officers.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Ms. Murphy, can you just state your name for the record? So really,
Get
Abigail,
friendly around the microphone.
Abigail Murphy, 71 Avenue A, Lowell.
and do you live in Lowell?
I do,
How long have you lived in Lowell?
for 30 years.
Okay. And where do you currently work?
I currently work at the manager of record for Bar 74, and I also work in a school here in the city.
All right. Prior to working as the manager of record for Bar 74, did you work at another bar before that?
Yes, sir.
And how long did you work there?
For approximately 4 years.
And what was your position there?
Manager.
So do you feel like you're familiar with the license rules and regulations for the city and the state?
Yes,
Okay. Do you recall the night in question that the officers testified about?
I do.
Can you tell me, how did you first interact with the officers that night?
I first interacted with the officers that night when my doorman came over and got me. I was behind the register counting the drawers at the end of the night, and he came in and he said that the police were out front and they needed to speak with me.
Okay, and did you go speak with them?
I did.
All right, and who initiated the conversation, you or them?
I would say it was them when I came out onto the, through the front doorway on Merrimack Street.
Okay, so you met them at the front door of the bar?
Yes.
All right, and did you start talking to them in the doorway of the bar?
I spoke with them in the doorway, like in between the doorway.
Okay, so from that vantage point, did they have a good view of the entire bar and what people in the bar were doing during your whole conversation?
Yes.
All right. About how far from you at the door would you say those people were? The people inside the bar?
Some of the people in the bar, there were some people that were in close proximity to the door. The two girls were, they came in and sat in the door. They parked the car out front so they could put the equipment inside, and they came back in and sat back down because, the DJ was waiting to get paid. And then maybe within all 30 feet, you could see everybody from the front door.
And did the officers ask you any questions when you came back over?
Not particularly, no.
What did they tell you? Did they give you a reason for why they asked you to come over?
They told me that they observed 2 females coming into the building and that we weren't allowed to have patrons in the building after 2 a.m.
And what did you tell them?
I told them that the people in the building were all staff. Everybody is waiting to get paid. I can ask everybody to leave now, and that's what they wanted me to do, is have everybody leave.
Okay. Did everybody leave while the officers were still standing there?
Yes.
Did they walk past the officers?
Yes.
Did you see any of the officers inquire of any of these people, whether they were employees or what their names were?
No.
Okay. Did the officers say anything to you about any of the women particularly?
They told me that there were local known prostitutes in downtown and that we could be letting prostitutes into our building. And that's when I explained to them that these are with the DJ. At the same time they're walking out, the girls were carrying the DJ equipment. Those girls showed up at 10 o'clock at night with the DJ. So they were kind of referring to them as downtown, as if we were letting just random people in the bar, but.
Did they explain or, give you any indication about how you would know that these were known prostitutes?
No.
Did they ask either of these women who were alleged local prostitutes their name? Or if
No.
they had any warrants out potentially?
No.
Okay. And after they mentioned this issue with them being potential prostitutes, did they say anything else to you about the bar?
They told me, I had asked the officers if they wanted to come inside and speak with the employees. The door was open. I mean, they said that they were just gonna write us up to the license commission because this bar has been in trouble so many times in the past.
I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Anybody have any questions?
Yes. Are you saying that the 11 people that were in the bar were with the DJ?
Not all 11 people were with the DJ. There was about 6 people with the DJ.
Many?
There was about 6 people that were with the DJ, and the rest of the staff that were inside were, in fact, security. There was about 17 people inside. That's how many people we had on staff that night. And I had to tell all my staff to leave. Nobody got paid. A bartender quit. She didn't get paid. She didn't get her tips for the end of the night. Thought we were, the troubles are just following us. So I really didn't know what to do.
And are you saying that the women left to bring equipment out of the bar and then came back? Is that what you're saying?
So the two girls, they left the bar at 1:45 when we had everybody kicked out of the building. Their car was parked on John Street. So they got in their car and they had waited for a spot out front of the building to clear, and they pulled their car up front, got out of the car. We let them back in the building.
And who let them back in?
My doorman.
That's Mr. Foreman?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Just to follow up to that, what was the purpose of letting them back in at that point?
Well, when they left at 1:45, the DJs come with a lot of equipment. We don't have a sound system in our building, so they bring in speakers and wires and a big board, and it is quite a production. It takes them about a half an hour to set it up and another half an hour to break it down.
Do we have any payment slips for that night? Any records of employees that night showing that they were there, working, and were paid? Counsel, you want to?
We don't have that with us tonight, but we also don't have any evidence that these people weren't employees. We don't have any names. We have testimony that there were a handful of people not drinking. I'm sorry, but, I mean, I understand the question, but that's like asking to prove a negative, and, I mean, of course there were employees working there, so, I mean, bar doesn't open without employees. So.
Well, I won't say any more, but I think, thank you.
I take your point, but I don't think it's asking to prove a negative. I think that's a different issue. So I'd like to ask the two police officers to come back up, and we can ask some questions. Gentlemen, could you go over again why you didn't speak to the employees?
Yes. We observed approximately a dozen people inside the establishment sitting around. We saw other employees actively cleaning up around the bar inside the establishment. When we asked for the patrons to leave, the 12 we counted, including the DJ, we only saw the DJ carrying out a piece of equipment at that time. When we asked them, the 11 patrons to leave, the other employees remained inside the bar at approximately 2:07 a.m. cleaning up after closing time. As indicated by the attorney in his email, referenced only 2 females that were associated with the DJ. Now they're saying there's up to 6 tonight associated with the DJ. And they made no mention to us of a photographer being present and any people being with the photographer when I spoke to the doorman or Ms. Murphy on that night in question. That was never brought to our attention. The reason we didn't go inside the establishment is there was 3 of us, approximately 12 patrons, approximately 4 to 6 employees. They weren't under investigation for any type of crime. We are investigating, like I said earlier, any rules and regulation violations of the establishment. If we went in, the people are not obligated to talk to us. It's after 2 a.m. in the morning. I do not think it's feel officer safety. It's better for us for them to come to us so we can get an accurate head count of who the patrons were. Because my past experience, when we go into bars and we do compliance checks, patrons run out of the bar. It's happened to us in other compliance checks just recently as of that same night, that same weekend. So that does happen where patrons, upon seeing the police, will flee out the back of the bar and through the front of the bar. We weren't there to cause any issues with the patrons. Our concern was with the licensee and why there were, we believe, 11 patrons that we counted leave when asked to do so, leave the establishment. The other employees remained, 4 to 6, cleaning up around the bar inside the establishment.
Thank you. All right. Any more, Mr. Jacobs? Please.
So with all due respect, actually licensees do have an obligation to cooperate with the police. So if they do enter and ask people like staff questions, they do have to respond. They can't just not respond. And then I don't understand why the officers would have assumed that these people would run out of the building if they're all sitting, not drinking, but sitting at a table, which was part of the testimony. 2 of the girls are sitting at a table 3 feet from the door, and the rest of the staff is cleaning. If the decision turns on providing employment records, I mean, we're happy to provide employment records. I don't know how we would get the DJ to produce all of his staff's records, but I think that's a little unreasonable when there are no names here. There's no information to show that these people were not staff. We would have no authority to force the DJ to produce a copy of his employment rolls, whether he pays his people as contractors. We would have no authority to do that.
You are aware that we're dealing with a small problem of underage drinking in Lowell.
But this has nothing to do with underage drinking, sir. And if it did, maybe...
Excuse me, but when they said people bolting out of the building, people who are underage that don't want to get caught.
I certainly understand that, and that may be a problem, but, you know, for this night, that's not the issue here. I know for a fact that there have been attempted stings just recently with underage people at this bar who have been turned away. So they're doing a good job, sir.
I'm sorry, I don't want to see you limited with appropriate questions, please.
I would ask just one more question about this promoter issue. If they had any information on what the promoter was promoting, if anything. That'd be my last question. Thank you.
If I might just make a statement, I don't think I see anything in the police reports about promoter. And the only thing that I do see is in the letter from the chief to the License Commission, there's a mention of promoter, but there's no allegation of any inappropriate use of a promoter.
That's correct. That's correct. It just came up.
To answer the council's question, that was a result of talking to Mrs. Murphy when she came to the door about the patrons that we believe are inside the establishment. She started off saying they're with the promoter, and then I explained that if there's a promoter, there's a procedure, they need to get permission from the license. Then she mentioned they're with the DJ. That's how the promoter DJ issue came up. It wasn't an issue with us. We were just clarifying who was trying to clarify who was in there. And she pointed out that 2 females were with the DJ. Like I stated earlier, there's no mention of anybody else being with the DJ. There was no mention of photographer or any type of entourage with the photographer.
So it's possible that she misspoke.
Yes, and there was no big issue.
And when you gave her a
wasn't an
clue,
issue.
she cleaned it up.
Correct. It was not an issue with me, not a problem. I can understand misspeaking. That was fine. That was not the issue. Let's just get some clarification of who was with, when she brought it up, who was with the DJ. And the 2 females we observed entered the establishment. She clarified that they were with the DJ. They just put some stuff in the car. And then it went to the conversation, as we stated after that, with the other matters.
Well, Captain, just sort of clarify, you're satisfied with the idea that the 2 women that entered were with the DJ, but it was the other people sitting at tables that were the violators, so to speak?
That's correct. So we asked them to have the patrons leave the establishment. We counted 11 people come out the door, and 2 of them were that female out of the 11. So, and the other person was the DJ. So we had 12 people who come out, the DJ, the 2 women, and 9 other patrons that counted. And then we observed employees still inside cleaning up around the bar inside the establishment.
So it's basically 9 people that appear to be inappropriately in the establishment.
Correct. And also counsel in his email that he sent to the License Commission states only speaks to 2 females, doesn't speak to the other 9 patrons that we believe were patrons of that establishment.
Okay. Thank you, Captain.
You're welcome.
Well, I just think we're going back to where we started from, what, 5 years ago? You've been here, Mr. Jacobs, as a regular for us. I just think this establishment has a lack of leadership from the top. The owner is not there, and I find it to be a very difficult situation not to have an owner-president in the establishment. It seems to be absentee over their ownership.
Well, I disagree. I mean, there are quite a few license holders in the city of Lowell who own the license or are shareholders in the company who live out of state. And you can't penalize a license owner, the owner of a company that holds the license, for living outside of the state.
I'm not doing that, sir. What I'm saying is, the absentee not being around the establishment, we just have problem after problem. There's nobody overseeing what goes on over there. We've been through this before. Let's not we've been through this before. I respect what you're trying to do.
No, but here I think it's totally different, sir. I really do.
I wish I could agree with you.
But what evidence has even been presented today that these people were not staff?
Your manager of record is well qualified to be a manager. I agree with you on that. She should have known that these people should have been out of the establishment.
They're
I'm not talking about the employees. I'm talking about the other, I think they said 8 or 9 people who were patrons left over in there. They should have been out of there.
She has testified that they were not patrons. And my point is that the police have no evidence that they were patrons or that they weren't employees. They are just making an assumption.
But they're not employees. She said they weren't employees.
No, she said that.
She said they were with the DJ.
Please. First of all, that's also staff. DJs who are there pursuant to the entertainment license can be there after the closing hours. They are not purchasing alcohol. They are cleaning up and leaving. You can't penalize. That'd be like saying, okay, the bar's going to close. Everybody has to be out at 1:45, including the entertainment. So while you have thousands of people pouring into downtown Lowell, you're going to force all the DJs in all these bars to be carrying out tons of speakers, computer equipment, soundboards, while you've got thousands of people, because they've got to be out at 1:45 too. That is not what the statute says.
So they need 9 people to help them do this? Come on.
She didn't say that there were 9 people with the DJ. What she said, and I'll let her say it herself.
There was two DJs, 2 photographers, and the DJ's girlfriends. And those were the same people. Like, at the end of the night, I said, who's who? Okay, I know when these DJs came in that this is who they came with. They came with a little entourage of people. That's what it was. And the rest of the people that were in the building were staff, and we made everybody leave. I have my staff here, like, who can testify that we made them leave, and, like, they didn't get to get paid that night.
And who were the people that remained?
I remained, Scotty Foreman remained, and Travis remained. 3 people stayed in the bar, and I asked them to stay inside while I was speaking to the police officers, and we told everybody else to leave because we have registers full of money. Like, I can't leave the building unattended, and at 2:07 in the morning, it's not.
Thank you.
Just to really quickly clarify, you don't mean Travis, me.
No.
You mean another Travis, right?
An employee, Travis,
Okay,
yes.
and what's his position?
He does security there.
All right. So you had the head of security, Scotty Foreman, the doorman, you, the manager of record, and Travis, the security personnel.
Yes.
And other than that, so what evidence has the city presented to suggest, even beyond a preponderance of the evidence, that these people were not employees? I think it turns right here on the testimony by Ms. Murphy that the officers came to the door. They're within 30 feet of all of these people. They don't even need to walk in. They can say, what's your name? Do you work here? What's your name? Do you work here? And none of that was done. Had that been done, we wouldn't even be here.
I have no further questions.
It's no secret, right? You guys know me. I know you. We all know everybody very well. We're all very familiar with each other. But we also know that from October until June, this bar was closed, all right? And you all are very familiar with the resolution that was reached between the parties. My client is hired this particular person who is a 30-year resident of Lowell, works in the school system, has kids in this town, and has experience working at other bars in this city. And who knows the rules and regulations here. She's vested in, not making or not letting things get out of hand. And then you get presented with a violation like this, with the facts here. I think my client has demonstrated at every turn here that she wants to make this work, cooperate, and this can't be it.
Is the captain still available? Captain, based on, I'm hearing arguments about the reentry, and I'm not sure whether you said at one point you're satisfied that they were with the DJ, those two that re-entered the bar?
Yes, according to the attorney's email, he stated that the only two people were, those two females were associated with the DJ.
Okay.
So I was satisfied with that.
Okay,
And, but there was no answer for the other 9 patrons.
I agree. Thank you. As a result of my questions, counsel, anything else you want to ask, say?
I'm sorry, it sounds like my email to the city solicitor addressing one bit of information about 2 women being called prostitutes is being used as testimony when it's not.
I'm not taking anything about any occupations of people that were there other than the employees. And I'm not judging any patrons or anybody else that walked in or out. And matter of fact, I think even the captain is leaning towards some, I'm taking it as leaning towards some idea that perhaps the reentry may not be as viable as it once appeared.
Fair enough.
So, trying to put it all together in my mind, I think we have a slight difference in testimony, in that the police say some left and some remained, the remainders being the employees, and those leaving being patrons who had overstayed their time. On the other hand, the Bar 74 testimony is everybody but 3 people cleared out. And that's a difficult thing for us to resolve without, I don't know, cameras, I guess. Is that a fair summation of the situation, Attorney Jacobs?
I think it's pretty close. But I would just add that there is literally no evidence to suggest that these people were not employees. And if there is a piece of evidence to suggest that they weren't employees, I point it out. I mean, I'm fallible just like everybody else, but I haven't heard one. The only evidence that I've heard tonight with any certainty and testimony of personal knowledge is from Ms. Murphy, who has testified that they were all employees of Bar 74 or employees or contractors of the DJ. And so without any testimony to the contrary, I don't see how that point can be refuted. We don't have anybody's names and no one was questioned, so.
They were sitting around.
Sorry?
Employees at 2 o'clock in the morning shouldn't be sitting around.
Well, maybe they shouldn't be sitting around, but patrons would be drinking, and these ones weren't. That's what you do at a bar when you're a patron or you're patronizing a bar, right? You drink.
And you talk.
Well, but talking anywhere is not unlawful. It's patronizing a bar, i.e. purchasing alcohol at a bar after a certain time period. That's what's a violation of the statute, and I don't think we're there. So,
And nothing further.
thank you, sir.
Well, I'll start off with Mr. Jacobs. As time goes on, and we've been concerned about this bar, as you're aware, for a long time, and I know that there was a revocation of the license, and the establishment was closed for a period of 6 months on our actions, and then through legal discussions, Mr. Salvo was granted a license to operate again. And I'm concerned that, and go back to my resume. This young lady came in with a good resume. She appeared to be responsible, but I think she should have known that you're working in a tough position because of all the prior attention that was brought to the bar. And we have to say, you've got to be extra careful. And I think we said that to Ms. Murphy when she came in. Got to be extra careful. And it's unfortunate that we have this before us and we're digging up things that we don't want to have dug up from the past. But we have to recognize that there were other problems with this owner. And I'm not going back any further than that. But I think what we have to do is, and I will say on count 2, the entry or re-entry, I don't find that there's sufficient evidence for a finding on that matter. On the hours of operation, I find that there were some people inside the bar that should not have been there after closing hours. And I'll leave it for further discussion of the other members of the board before we go into anything final.
I agree with you, Commissioner, on the second offense. There should be no finding on that. I do have a problem with the amount of people that were in the bar, whether they were working for the establishment or working for the I guess, DJ. I understand the establishment has to clean up and they have to be there. I'm for that. But I don't understand why the DJ has to have 9 people with them. I mean, it's just, that's your responsibility to get them the heck out of there. That's how I feel about it. That's my problem. I have no more to say.
I concur with my colleagues about item number 2. It would have been helpful if Ms. Murphy had more clearly, quickly articulated the issue, but that's fine. We got to the right answer. I agree that the number of people in there not apparently working is a little bothersome. On the other hand, we're getting back up on our feet here. I want to send the message, but I don't want to damage the bar. I mean, I would be happy for a day held in abeyance for a year, because we need to send a signal about how important it is to meet the hours and to work hard at that and get people paid before they wander off.
Mr. Chairman, is that in the form of a motion?
No, it's in the form of a discussion.
Discussion?
See what you guys say.
Okay. At this point, I would say that perhaps there needs to be a little bit more, that I would say that we'll do the 1 day, but impose the suspension to be served on a weekend night in August. And I'll make that in the form of a motion. To suspend the license for 1 night. It'll be on a Friday night, and I think in August is at the convenience of Mr. Nguyen being able to put together the notice and get it out to the license holder.
Can I just, before the vote? Just stand by one.
And is that it, Commissioner, just a night suspension?
Yes. I'm going a little further than what the chairman had talked about in discussion, that it be held in abeyance. I think it should be imposed.
I would recommend that we give 3-day suspension, 1 day to be served, 2 held in abeyance.
3 days.
And it should be held for at least
I'm sorry, but I have to ask.
Wait, excuse me, we're having a discussion here.
I think I can go along with that, just as, we'll do the 1-day suspension and the 3 days, 2 held in abeyance. And,
Okay, so that's the motion.
counsel, do you want to be heard on the motion?
I would, thank you. I just would like to know if the commission could tell me, what piece of evidence are you relying on for a finding that the people inside this bar at that time were not employees or were patrons?
You show us that they were?
But we don't have the burden of proof, sir.
Excuse
city
me,
does.
excuse me. The testimony of the police is what I'm relying upon. And for me, it's good enough.
But that's my point. The police aren't testifying to any specific facts that they were patrons of the bar. They haven't testified to a single fact, actually. They are making an assumption, a hunch, but there's no facts. That is not evidence. An assumption is not evidence. You have direct testimony from the manager of record as to the specific facts. The preponderance of the evidence in this case is so clearly in favor of the licensee.
I'm sure you'll be
And
appealing.
I just want to add one more point. One of the requirements in the agreement between the city and the licensee was good faith, and that this whole process that wouldn't be used against my client. And now, the very first license violation, which there is no evidence for whatsoever, and you're imposing straight to suspension, 1 day and 3 days for this with not a shred of factual evidence? It's unreal. It's outrageous. I'm sorry, sir, but it is absolutely outrageous that the committee is going to make this decision for a suspension without a single fact that these people were patrons.
Counselor,
And
didn't
testimony that they weren't drinking.
your manager of record state that there were 9 people in the
No,
bar?
she stated that there were 17 people in the whole bar between employees, security, the DJs.
I don't think 17 was the number that I heard.
Was it 17 total? Thank you. There were 17. The cops only saw 11 people.
That's what we're talking about, the 11 people.
There are way more people who work at the bar and who were with the DJs. But that's even besides the point. How is the number of people the issue when there's no fact?
You didn't account for 3 of the people at least.
I'm sorry. Can we? What 3 people? What were their names? What were their
The ones
names?
that didn't exit the bar out the front door.
Which one? The 3 people that didn't exit? She did testify. She said one was Travis, a security person. The second one, that's Travis, by the way. The second one was Abigail Murphy, the manager of record, and the third one was Scotty, the door guy. Those are the 3 people that stayed. Those are the 3 people that they said were continuing to work out, clean up. But I'm completely floored. There is not one fact, not a single fact, that suggests that any of them were patrons, and we're going to suspension. The penalties in this commission need to be applied consistently and equitably. That's the problem. That is the problem I have always had with this commission and others. You need to apply this equitably and consistently across the board, and that doesn't get done.
Say aye.
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 Okey dokey.
I know, but for the record, Mr. Nguyen, shall we set a date for suspension?
Yes.
The 3-day suspension to
1 day to serve, 2 held in abeyance.
would be August 30th, 31st, and September 1st. 30th would be the day to serve, and the 31st and 32nd, and the 1st of September would be days to be held in abeyance for 1 year.
No, there's only 2 days held in abeyance.
Yeah.
1 day served, 2 in abeyance. Total of 3 days.
Correct, so it's a 3-day suspension, 2 days to be held in abeyance. And I'm just citing that of the 3-day suspension, effective August 30th, the day to be served would be August 30th to serve, but it would be for the 31st and the September 1. And the 2 days held in abeyance would be for 1 year. Is that the commission's wish?
Yes.
Yes.
So, Mr. Nguyen, can we reschedule this hearing for sometime in August?
Well, let me just open it up first. Commissioner Krieger, if I may. Ms. Walterding, would you please go to the rostrum? For the purposes of the agenda, item number is number 4. We have a public hearing continued from July 11, 2019 on the application by Renee M. Walterding, doing business as Mill City Barbecue and Brew, an all-alcoholic beverage restaurant licensee at 1018 Gorham Street, for change of location to 11 Kearney Square, which is approximately 3,750 square feet, 2 entrances, 2 exits, first floor dining and kitchen, and a basement for storage only. Mr. Chair, Commissioner Krieger, and members of the commission, Commissioner McCarthy, Commissioner Donahue. Ms. Walterding is the licensee of record at 1018 Gorham Street. She is looking to relocate her license from that address to 11 Kearney Square. A legal notice had been published in the Lowell Sun newspaper on Friday, June 28th, 2019, for a hearing to be held on July 11th. When we had the hearing scheduled on July 11th, Ms. Walterding acknowledged that her mailing initially was by first-class mail to the abutters. There are approximately 59 abutters based on the city assessor's list of abutters at the request of Ms. Walterding, which she had paid for that list. In notifying the abutters by first-class mail, it failed to meet the requirement of notification to abutters by, which is by traditionally and by in accordance with state law, Section 15A, Chapter 138, to send notice by certified mail return receipt, so you have record of proof. So on July 11th, Ms. Walter Ting was instructed to do the mailing by certified mail return receipt for a hearing to be held this day, July 25th, but to include with the notice to the abutters of the published notice that was June 28th, a cover letter to identify the fact that these abutters who would receive this notice would know that the hearing was continued and that it was to be held July 25th. Yesterday, Ms. Walterton came to the office, the law office where I'm working, and brought in some green return receipts and also one envelope that was undeliverable by the post office. After she left, first before she left, I asked if she did receive any more green return receipts to make them available to me for this meeting today. I just spoke with her now before this matter is before you, and she indicated that she had no other return receipts. But she did identify the fact that there was one envelope that was undeliverable, and I just got her acknowledgement, and she can speak for herself, that included in the envelope was a copy of the legal notice that was published on June 28th, 2019. Unfortunately, for the fact is that if you were receiving that notice, you would not realize that you were receiving it after the hearing had been held, and that the date of notice on the postal stamp was July 17th. So you would be completely upset, I would think, to think that you're receiving this notice after it's been published and after the hearing has been held. And so my recommendation to the commission, and to their better judgment, but that this matter should be rescheduled for new public hearing and a new legal notice published.
Excuse me, can I just ask one question about that? So does that mean I have to redo all that? Because right there was over $500, and that's why I didn't understand it. From having a liquor license several times in the past, I've never done an abutters, so I was completely unaware of how the process. I did keep coming to you. I guess I misunderstood the cover letter part. It was already sealed up, so when I took it back to the post office, I didn't undo what I had already paid for. So I guess that's where the mistake was. I wasn't aware that I had to open all of the mail again and then put the new notice in there. It was already sealed up from the 11th.
Wouldn't she have to do that, Ryan?
Really?
Again? Somebody, counsel,
The
please.
fact is that
Let's see what counsel says, Ryan.
So I did have an opportunity to speak with Secretary Wynn about this and review the statute. And basically, the license can transfer and go through, but if any abutter who never received notice of tonight's hearing, my understanding is the notice that was mailed was in regard to the last meeting on July 11th. So it didn't provide notice to the abutters for this meeting. So under the statute, any abutter would have the ability to make a complaint in writing to the local licensing authority. And if, in fact, it's shown that they did not receive notice, that would be grounds for the license to be canceled. So it's not necessarily required in order to grant the license, but my understanding is there's 59 abutters. So that's 59 different people who have not been provided with notice of this hearing and could potentially, at a later date, object in the event that the license transfer does go through. So that would potentially still be hanging out there if the license were to go through without having the proper notice to the abutters.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So also, if I may, also in keeping with what Attorney LaGrasso has just mentioned, there is an affidavit that we have to rely upon, that the licensee notified the abutters in accordance with section and chapter of Mass General Law. And her signature has to be witnessed by a notary. On your behalf, I notify the Alcohol Beverages Control Commission of the approval the commission would grant for such a transaction. And 9 out of 10 times, it's always favorable. In fact, I would say it's 10 out of 10 times it's favorable. Unfortunately, as Attorney LaGrasso has mentioned, the risk is not so much for the license commission, but for the license holder. For if there is one of those 59 property owners having received that notice, if that notice had been served and I opened that up and it was delivered to me, and I'm seeing it for the first time, not having received the first-class mailing to begin with, and seeing this, I would say, how am I getting this not only after the public hearing had been held, but I'm getting it mailed to me after the public hearing had been held. It's not like the mail was held up in the mail, or I was out of town on vacation to not be able to see it, but to know that I was getting it sent to me after the fact. Purposely, Renee, was the idea that if you put a cover letter to this notice, and I'm getting it, then I understand, well, now I have an opportunity to come to this meeting tonight on July 25th to tell the commission I like the idea of Mill City Barbecue coming to next to my building where I live. Unfortunately, I would say that we know it's downtown, we know it's a location that's had a license several times before. And chances of anyone objecting to it are slim and none. I just think the fault should be remedied for the sake of the licensee, and it's an expensive lesson to learn, but had she had legal counsel to support her in this matter, maybe she would have had to spend much more money than she initially had spent for the Postal Service. But I don't think the commission is in a position, knowing what you know, that can proceed forward with this application as it is.
Is the city going to recompense for the bad address?
There's no recompense for the city. I can...
By providing bad information?
I didn't provide no bad information.
Yeah, my understanding is that it's not an issue of bad information being provided. It's just an issue of...
The cover letter.
She sent that.
Right, so basically
Based on an address list from...
Right, there's no issue with who the abutters were. It's the issue is...
Except for this issue.
The issue is with the notice. The notice that was provided gives notice of the July 11th hearing, not tonight's hearing.
I'm sorry, I'm not being articulate. She sent, at some expense, to an address that apparently doesn't exist, according to the federal government. Well, some
But
private
Commissioner Krieger,
corporation of the federal government.
that's only one of 59.
I understand that.
And that's just whatever information our assessor's office has on file for that particular location.
Right. And we gave it to her and told her to send...
Right, but the issue isn't that one got returned. The issue is that the notice that was provided
I'm
was
sorry,
not for tonight's
the
hearing.
issue that I'm asking about is, are we going to recompense her for the $6 and some odd cents that she spent going to an address that doesn't exist?
Sir, Commissioner Krieger,
Yes.
there's no recompense for this matter. It's circumstances being what they are.
Counsel, if that had come back, that one alone, and it had been adequate cover letter and today's date, and the legal notice, we would be able to go forward with that as an attempt to make service.
Right, no issue. Her obligation was only to provide the notice to
Provide
the
the
list
notice.
that was provided
So
to her.
If that one came back and the other 58 were sent out with the cover letter and today's date, we would have no problem with approving it. That would be an attempt at good service.
Right, even if more came back, as long as they were to the address on the list that was provided by the city.
Right.
There would be no issue, as long as that attempt was made to that address of record with the city.
Thank you.
Okay, unfortunately, it looks like we're gonna have to do this over.
No, wait. You, Mr. Commissioner, have brought forward the idea that we could go at risk here. I'm prepared to go at risk.
Thank you.
And, I mean, in all reality, the risk lies with the licensee. The challenge would be by the abutters to the issuance of the license because they didn't receive notice from the licensee, not from the city. So it's really, it's an issue, but, and it's a risk, but it's really a risk for the licensee.
Do you want to be at risk?
Yes, because I'm not, there's nothing that I ever do. I mean, I close at 9, I don't serve underage, I cook wonderful barbecue. I've never been somewhere where they opposed it.
I
So
think this is great for the city, by the way.
I'm just willing to do it because I've been trying to get downtown for 5 years. I sunk my life savings up in Gorham Street. I finally got the opportunity to come here, and it just seems like I'm just knocking against the wall. I've been in business out here already, almost 5 years.
One
I've
thing
never
that I
had
do just
one
want to make
trouble.
clear is, I don't know what the even if the license is approved by the local commission, it would still have to go to the ABCC, and I don't know what, if any, issue they would take with the fact that abutters were not properly notified. So I can't speak to what their take on this would be.
Can I address that, if I may? In anticipation that this commission would take favorable action on this application right now, for me to send notice to the Alcohol Beverages Control Commission, I would give the date based on, there's a form that I use that's required by the ABC. It's identified as a licensing authority certification. It says application was filed by the local licensing authority, date, that was filed on June 18th, 2019. Was it advertised? Yes. Date published, June 28th, 2019. Abutters notified? Yes. Date of notice, July 17th, 2019. Publication was the Lowell Sun newspaper. And I add to remarks, conditions, licensee notified abutters via first-class postage on July 1st, 2019, by certified mail return receipt on July 17th, 2019. That would be on the form for License Commission approval. I would be very surprised if the first person who saw this at the ABC didn't contact the board secretary and question the manner of notification and what did the License Commission know and when did they know it. I'd be surprised if they didn't contact me. I would just say to you, members of the commission, as your representative before the Alcohol Beverages Control Commission, and as I've sat before the ABC on hearings to testify, I would tell them what I've told you this evening. And if the commission wants to grant this license as it is, as you know it, then the risk is that the ABC might remand it back to the local board for new hearing.
Mr. Chairman, I want to see her do well. I know she's done well up on Gorham Street, but I think we got to be careful with the law in compliance with the requirements of Mass General laws, and that we don't even have full return of service of the abutters, and they were given inadequate information. I can't at this time see voting for a license to be given. I think it's a hard lesson, but I think we have to go through and see her do her due diligence in notifying the abutters as required by Mass General Law. Thank you.
I guess I have to agree with Commissioner Donahue, unfortunately. And I would just ask, is there somebody in the city that could help her set this up and do it the right way, so this doesn't happen again?
I know Ryan said that he had offered to help with the
No,
last go
no,
around.
no, he's uptight, no, no. All I need to do is probably send a cover letter with the new, I don't even want to go back up there to, I think I misunderstood it from the beginning, but after coming back and talking to Ryan about 4 or 5 times, I understand what
Okay.
I need to do.
Okay, all right, all right. Thank
So
you.
let me just reiterate what you understand, Renee.
Wait, you can do that with her later. What we need to know is we have to set a meeting date.
So if the commission would schedule a new hearing date for such an application, then I would suggest that that be August 22nd. And I would suggest that the commission have a legal notice published for Friday, August 2nd, for a hearing to be held August 22nd. And so that she would notify the abutters by return receipt request. And all she would be required to do under those conditions, so long as she mailed out the notice no later than August 5th, by certified mail return receipt, is the legal notice itself, and nothing else be added. No cover letter, it would just be the legal notice as she had done previously.
There will be a new legal notice?
A new legal notice, but her expense would be, again, mailing by certified mail return receipt.
And just to be clear, the notice needs to be of the August 22 hearing date. That's what the abutters need notice of.
Which the city will put into the local newspaper as soon as possible.
So the legal notice would be recommending that the legal notice be published on Friday the 2nd of August, for a hearing to be held on Thursday, August 22nd at 6 p.m. here at the City Council Chamber, and that she would do the mailing no later than Monday, August 5th, by certified mail return receipt request, with the current list of abutters she received from the city assessor's office in June of 2000. Even if that one notice that she sent came back undeliverable, she still should be sending a notice to that address as well.
Right.
Why?
Because it's very possible that the Postal Service may not have done it properly in doing their job.
It's also the requirement of the statute that the notice be sent to the address. It's what's required by the statute, though. It's notice needs to go to the abutters at the address identified that's on record with the city, even if that's not the correct address.
It'd be the obligation, the obligation of the owner to notify the city if the corporation moved. Whoever it is, I think, I see an LLC, but
The statute requires the obligation is on the applicant to notify abutters.
right, but the abutter has an obligation to notify the Secretary of State's office or the City of Lowell if they move so that they can get mailings.
Right, that should be the case, but clearly with this particular entity, they haven't provided an updated address. So that's the address that the assessor's office has on file for that particular entity.
August 22nd,
New hearing on August 22nd,
2019, for 6 p.m.
and we will
And a
publish...
legal notice for publication in the Lowell Sun newspaper for Friday, August 2nd.
Second.
No second?
Just wait, wait.
He had
All
a,
in favor, say aye.
aye.
He watched too much Robert Mueller.
We're done?
Don't leave. Have a seat. Thank you. All right. Item 7.
Proceeding with communication from Superintendent of Police Raymond Kelly Richardson. Communication is dated July 11, 2019. This is an allegation of misconduct charged against the licensee Centerville Social Club, David Burns, manager, the all alcoholic beverage club licensee at 364 West 6th Street.
I move we schedule a hearing for the 22nd of August.
Seconded.
All in favor, say aye. Number 8.
Number 8 is a communication from Raymond Kelly Richardson, Superintendent of Police, dated July 23, 2019, regarding recommendation for consideration review of the ABC decision finding the last safe in violation, that the last safe serve a 2-day suspension held in abeyance per License Commission. The recommendation is for a hearing for the commission to have last safe come before the board.
Move the 22nd.
Seconded.
All in favor, say aye.
That's the
Anybody
agenda.
want to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Seconded.
All in favor, say aye.
Renee, do you understand?